From a coverage standpoint, are there reasons that you see that companies will not purchase cyber liability coverage as it currently exists? And are there any reasons, or are any of these reasons indicative of where coverage can be expanded?
I'm going to give you a few areas in various contracts that I've looked at that I think raise some concerns for all of us. I'm just going to go through these and I'm going to talk about two specifically. Related acts provisions, interrelated acts provisions and exclusions. These appear not only in cyber policies but also in D&O and E&O policies. This is an area that I really think insurers and insurers really need to get together and find a common ground of understanding. And the reason I say that is because I have seen situations where ambiguous and unclear related acts provisions are used both against and on behalf of policyholders. The positions taken are entirely inconsistent from case to case, and I think we, as partners in this insurance relationship, need to figure out what risks we do and don't want to cover. But the way these related acts provisions are currently worded is problematic. The preamble to the exclusion language. Now this is something only insurance nerds can really get excited about. Right now, or in some cases, you've had preamble language that says that a loss is excluded for anything alleging, arising out of, or resulting from, directly or indirectly, etc. The new language I've seen is alleging, arising out of, based upon, or attributable to. Maybe not a big difference. There's actually case law out there interpreting the provisions attributable to and directly or indirectly arising from. The second one I read is the new language that I'm becoming familiar with. And whenever I see a change to an exclusion, from a policyholder's perspective, I have to conclude it's not for the policyholder's behalf. Maybe I'm being cynical. But upon doing some research into this, this is another area where I raised, in the context of a negotiation recently, if the carrier was comfortable with the directly or indirectly language earlier, why do they want to switch to the attributable to language?
Well, what I would like to say is that we've tried to evolve this policy and these wordings over the course of the last 15 years. And yes, I think we've all experienced issues in structurally trying to get this right. But the other thing I think is that you can't, I think, look at all of these wordings in isolation. There is, if you like, there are some more commoditised policy responses. At the other end of the spectrum, with some of the more complex risks, I think all of those issues are being addressed, and I think what we're talking about is that vast middle run of policies where everyone's trying to get into the middle ground. You have a plethora of new players, inexperienced players, and I think it's fine to say that, yeah, look, there are these issues here, but I think everyone's trying to scratch around at the lowest common denominator, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that I think as an industry we've all got the same issues.
If I can just follow up on one of Matthew's points.
Sure.
I think that it's fair to say that it is expected of insured clients to act as a prudent uninsured. That phrase is used very frequently in terms of mitigating claims and doing what is in the best interests of both the insured and the insurer, in terms of minimising the potential scope of litigation following a data breach, for example. And this language, can be pretty common, because certainly from an E&O policies, which obviously a lot of these data breach policies have evolved from, was standard and never really questioned. So I think that where we're going in terms of mitigation, particularly when it comes to things like law enforcement, data breach, state laws, which perhaps require actions which are deemed necessary, whether or not the insurer is involved in that process, and perhaps not even informed in the event of a law enforcement gagging order. So there are some major issues around that language which we're all trying to grapple with, and I think that on behalf of the insurers, the intention is certainly to work with brokers and insurers to help minimise all of our exposure.
Point two, back to the previous comment about the potential for prejudice and taking any actions, whatnot, in the aftermath of an event. For one of the areas, and this ties back to my first question as well, One of the areas that people are looking to expand coverage into would be, call it event response, crisis management, et cetera, beyond a privacy event. So when you start to talk about cyber as it relates to operational risk and so forth, now on the privacy side of things, because there's been a playbook and a pretty good understanding of what needs to be done and what timeliness and so forth, the insurer can make a pretty good case that if you did something wrong that prejudiced them, okay, that language speaks to that, and that's separate and apart though from when you start to get to highly sophisticated responses to crisis events. Having that language in the policy, if we can take coverage beyond just crisis responses relates to privacy to operational and so forth, now the potential concern from the insurance point of view is, how does the insurance company really even know what I need to do and what needs to happen when I'm talking about cyber as it relates to control systems and so forth? So I think looking at that specifically, if as an industry we can get around to expanding the coverage, it is very much a necessary component of the process.
Okay, thanks, guys.
I know we called for this a long time ago, but I think what this also gets back to is we're going to talk about a lot of issues that maybe aren't covered right now, but that could be. But one of the things I think would help this is if the insurance industry, if there was some commonality in these forms, and if we ever got to the point where we had an ISO form that we were working off of, rather than everybody coming up with their own languages and their own preambles. I know Scott and Mike hate it. I hated it as a broker too, trying to compare these policies. And to Matthew's point, I mean, it's down to commas in some cases, and everybody has a different approach. And I think eventually, one of the things we're going to see in cyber is that we're going to all start using maybe some more common language, and I think that'll help part of that process.
Okay, thank you, guys.